You do have to be willing. Not that it's right, not that it's definite, but you have to be willing to put on the line your future coaching career. And this is a guy who is still not quite 40 years old, who has to assume maybe he'll get a college job at some point, but it's not like the racial biases are any different. Look at the history at the NCAA. In some respects, it's been worse than the NFL, but he's going to have a hard time finding a job. And hopefully somebody will do the right thing. And it'd be great if the Saints would who have been on the wrong end of some mistreatment from the league office over the past 10 years. It would be great if Gail Benson would decide that she stands with Brian Flores. That would be something if that happened. I don't think it will. But you have to go into this process if you're Brian Flores assuming that you're going to be frozen out just like Colin Kaepernick was for good.
I think that is how strongly Brian Flores believed in and believes in what he's doing, Mike. And I think the one thing about this case, the overarching case, is that if you talk to people who really know Brian Flores, they'll tell you, in essence, that behind his absolute total love of football is an extremely principled person. And I think regardless of what he was going to do, regardless of what you would want to believe about whether he did a good job in Miami or whether it was a house of cards or whatever you would feel about it, I think that it takes someone with a tremendous amount to lose to do something like this, to really try to promote real change in the National Football League. And so for that reason, and again, I am assuming that Brian Flores believes everything in this lawsuit and can stand behind it and can also offer proof that it happened. I'm assuming that. I don't know that. We'll see, because there are two sides to every story. But in my opinion, when I just look at this, one of the first things that you think after reading this lawsuit is Brian Flores is a young man, and he understands that he's putting his career on the line for in many ways, for every other black coach out there to try to make sure that this doesn't happen to them as well.
And the risk he's consciously taking almost gives his claims greater credibility. Why would you show up at the table knowing what the price of admission is unless you thought you had the goods? And one of the pieces of evidence he will utilize, and it appears in very jarring fashion at the very bottom of the formal style of the case, at the very top where it says Brian Flores versus etc., right below the line, there is the quote from Bill Belichick, including a word that we cannot use here. Sorry, I effed this up. I double-checked and misread the text. I think they are naming Brian Daboll. They are the Giants. And what happened was Bill Belichick accidentally texted congratulations to Brian Flores when he meant to text congratulations to another former assistant in New England, Brian Daboll. And really, it's as simple as autofill, Peter. We've all had, I know I've had an autofill failure. You start putting in the name, and it doesn't necessarily finish the name that you wanted it to. And that may be what happened here, but it was kind of an Abbott and Costello routine if you look at the text messages, where Brian Flores was confused at first that he's getting the Giants job, and it turns out that Brian Daboll was getting the Giants job, and Brian Flores was confused because he hadn't even interviewed for the Giants job yet, and that's what feeds into his theory and his allegation that the Giants already knew what they were going to do, that the interview with Brian Flores was a sham, as Flores calls it. And here's a timeline that was established via his appearance on CBS Mornings. Art Stapleton, Newsday, put this together. The text from Belichick came on a Monday. Brian Daboll interviewed with the Giants on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, Daboll, sufficiently upset by the situation, he contacted CBS for a sit-down interview. Thursday, he has his interview with the Giants. Friday, Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator of the Bills, interviews with the Giants. Friday night, Brian Daboll gets the job. So fascinating that Flores was already activating machinery to push back even before he interviewed Peter.
And, look, I think, Mike, that timeline shows that Brian Flores basically knew that if these text messages were accurate, and obviously he got them from Bill Belichick. So after he got these text messages, that to him, as I read the complaint, after he got these text messages, that was his final straw. That's when he knew he had to do something, that he couldn't sit quietly on the sidelines, and he couldn't just think, well, hey, maybe I'll get the Houston job. At that point, this all became bigger than me trying to get a head coaching job in the NFL. Because I'm sure that deep down, Brian Flores is thinking, I don't want to play this game anymore. I don't want to be a pawn in this game anymore. I did the best that I could in Miami. The owner, and again, these are clearly Brian Flores' words. They are not mine. But the owner wanted me to throw games so that we could have a better draft position. The owner and I did not see eye to eye at all, so he fired me. Do I want to go somewhere else and continue to play this game, or do I want to expose, at least one franchise, and maybe a lot more than one, what's going on in the NFL, what really happens in the NFL? And I think that's why it is laudable that he has basically taken himself out of this business and said, I would rather expose what is happening in this business than to shut my mouth and to be a part of a business that I truly, right now, that many parts of it that I truly detest.
And I can understand why he was upset when he found out that they had already decided on Brian Daboll without even talking to him. Look, the big risk that any team takes when hiring as a head coach someone who has been a coordinator and never a head coach is that the person will be able to do a fundamentally different job. And some people can, and some people can't. When you have a candidate who has shown that he can do the job successfully and put together back-to-back winning seasons in Miami for the first time in a generation, you would think that would give him, at a minimum, equal footing, if not greater consideration, because you eliminate that risk that this person can't do the next higher job than the one that he currently has. So I could see why that would have been the last straw for Brian Flores and get him to decide to put these wheels in motion. I mean, it was obvious when I saw the lawsuit. This isn't something that got whipped up over the weekend. This is something that's been brewing. This is something that he probably realized after his dealings with Stephen Ross that at some point his career was going to take this turn. And again, good for him for taking this risk and for doing the thing that he thought he needed to do, not just for himself, but for all the other black coaches out there who have been unfairly overlooked in the past and who were in position to continue to be unfairly overlooked in the future, absent the kind of change that hopefully this lawsuit will spark. Whatever happens with the lawsuit, if it ends up in arbitration, we never hear from it again, if it gets settled, whatever. Hopefully the mere filing of it, Peter, will be the thing that prompts real change for the NFL going forward.
Mike, I also think the one other part of this that got a little bit lost is just the fact that Brian Flores has so many tentacles in this case. And when you can involve the greatest coach in the game, Bill Belichick, you then basically, and you obviously share the text messages from Belichick. To me, this case is so compelling because it has the gravitas that involves the greatest coach in the game, involves one of the 32 owners, and involves a systemic group or a systemic set, basically a systemic ethos, I guess is the best way to put it, that basically says, it is going to be very, very difficult for black coaches to get jobs against their white counterparts in the NFL. as long as the current group of 32 owners in the NFL remains an all-white fraternity, and until that changes, and again, I don't know how it's going to change. I really don't. I don't know how many people in the world have $4 billion to even get involved. $4 billion spare dollars, I should say, to get involved, to go out and buy franchises and to get them up and running. So to me, this is a gigantic issue, Mike. It's a gigantic issue. And for Brian Flores to have thrown all of this open, I mean, when I asked you before in the show, who does the system of arbitration benefit? I mean, I knew you were going to say the NFL because obviously it does. And that's one of the reasons why I just simply hope that this is a case that is heard in the public square, because we need to hear this. And let's just say that Flores is proven wrong. Whatever it is, we just need to find out the truth, because what is in his lawsuit is extremely ugly, and it's very hard for the NFL to just say nothing to see here while paying Brian Flores X number of millions to make this go away. I don't want that. I don't think anybody should want that.
You said something there that made a little flame flicker in my brain. And I know that the NFL is concerned about the ongoing increase in franchise values, that it decreases the pool of people who have the ability to purchase a team. And the model has been, but for the Green Bay Packers, who issued stock back in the 20s because they were almost out of money, and that was the thing they could come up with, and the NFL let them do it. The NFL would have never let them do it in today's game. No other team is allowed to do it. At some point, Peter, I think these teams need to be corporations. I think at some point, not that corporations are free from this kind of behavior, but I think at some point a pivot away from one person who is the emperor of a billion-dollar football team toward a group that can potentially be more diverse, a diverse board of directors, chief executive, an executive staff, something that is decentralized. There are too many eggs in the one basket, and it results in, at the end of the day, no matter what the NFL does to try to get these teams to be fair, to be equitable, to have diverse hiring practices, it's the one guy who is never told no, who is never told what to do, who is never told to do anything other than he wants to do, being expected to do something other than what he wants to do. That doesn't work, especially in this setting.
You know, Mike, you're absolutely right, which is why we need to hear the truth. There cannot be a settlement on this. We need to hear exactly what happened with this. And, you know, could Bill Belichick have been exaggerating something in his text? Could he, we just need to hear from everybody involved in this story. And then we need to allow a jury of their peers to decide what's right and wrong. And that is my fervent hope. The one other thing, Mike, that I believe really, really has to happen is that Roger Goodell has to be held accountable for the league's reaction to this and the league's investigation into this. Because a credible member of the National Football League, now an ex-member in Brian Flores, has accused the man who hired him with basically asking him to essentially try to fix games. Brian Flores has thrown a Molotov cocktail at the NFL. And for the NFL to insult everybody who likes the NFL and everybody who loves the NFL, for the NFL to insult the fans who love this game by saying that this case is totally without merit is a disgrace. And Roger Goodell needs to be held to account for this, for how something like that could be said by this league, instead of saying that, We believe we have done everything that we can to try to promote racial equality among all areas of our league. But we are going to investigate the charges here, and we'll have no further comment while this investigation is taking place. I don't understand how you can respond to charges that Brian Flores made by saying there is nothing to see here.
And that is an excellent point, and that continues to resonate. And presumably some lawyer, maybe Jeff Pash, the general counsel, told PR this is how we're going to deal with it. Nobody took a step back and asked the tough question of, should we really deal with it this way? Because what's wrong with saying these are serious charges and we plan to investigate them, but it's a clue as to where it's going to go. It's going to be fight, 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 fight. It's going to be do everything you can to make Brian Flores look bad. That thing that I always asked a potential client who was getting ready to sue a company, I knew what was going to happen. They were going to come after that person aggressively. Number one, what's the worst thing about yourself that could potentially come to light? And number two, are you comfortable with it coming to light? If the answer to number two is no, you shouldn't file this lawsuit, because they're going to come after you with everything they have, because they're going to make it about you, not about them. And I think that's what we'll see the NFL do.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.